On today's show, with the Capitals' defeat of the Boston Bruins, they not only move into first place in the Metro, but they move into first place in the Eastern Conference.
Your Locked On Capitals, your daily podcast on the Washington Capitals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Well, hello and welcome into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Dan Holme. I've covered the Capitals for the last 3 seasons for Locked On and various other outlets before that. I'm also the host of the weekly show called The Capitals Minutecast, available wherever you find your podcasts. So in this edition of Locked On Capitals, we talk about how the Capitals got some sweet revenge this afternoon as they take down the Boston Bruins. What changed in this game? I'll talk about that a little bit later. I'll talk about how special teams showed up huge for the team. Next, I'll talk about defense and how that made a big impact in this game. And then a little bit later, I will talk about how it was Ivan Miroshnichenko in this game and Jakob Vrana was out. But just to get it going here, it was some matinee action for the Capitals as they were looking for some payback over the Boston Bruins. As we know, the Capitals struggled in the last game, and the Bruins ultimately won that game. So it was a good feeling, not just because of that, but also because the Capitals had just come off a loss from the Red Wings just before that. And I think that there was a certain level of frustration in the post-game conference from Spencer Carberry. He mentioned something that was kind of interesting to me as he said, things that were working for this team earlier in the season aren't necessarily working right now. And I think that that is why you're starting to see things jumbled up a little bit. I think that ultimately that is why that you saw Ivan Miroshnichenko draw in and Jakob Vrana as the healthy scratch. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. But that was some interesting comments. And you saw a level of desperation from the Capitals in this game to do whatever it took to win this game. Towards the end of the game, there were guys laying themselves out in front of the puck, whatever it took, as it did appear that the Bruins were throwing the kitchen sink at the Capitals. But in this game, the Capitals had the answer and some fun hockey, some early afternoon action, and the Capitals reigning victorious in this game was truly a great moment. So that is what I will talk about in this segment. Like I said, particularly sweet for the Capitals, especially after their previous defeat to the Bruins. Now, it's not only that, like I mentioned, they lost to the Red Wings. The Capitals were looking to regain their momentum. As I referenced off the top of the show, not only in first place in the Metropolitan Division, but in first place in the Eastern Conference. Let that kind of soak in and reverberate about what this team is doing. That I did a Locked On special with the other hosts from the Metro Division earlier in the season. And where are all of those teams? Every one of those hosts, they said, we don't know how to tell you, Dan, but the Capitals, well, they're not going to be very good this season. They're not going to make it to the playoffs. Who were some of those hosts? That was the Rangers. Where are they? Last place in the Metro. The Islanders, second to last place in the Metro. And it was Locked On Carolina Hurricanes, who are one place down. But who at this moment, right now, reigns supreme? Let's hear it, everyone. Your Washington Capitals. And quite a big statement for the Capitals, getting it done, doing whatever it takes to pick up the big win. So let's get into the game breakdown. Is it did appear that Boston could have run away from it from the very start. The Caps had a rough start with Boston snatching the lead just over a minute into the game thanks to a goal from Justin Brazeau. And they rolled the statistic that even though the other team scores first, doesn't spell defeat for the Capitals like it has in the past. That even though they give up the lead sometimes first, they can bounce back. They can get it done. And that was evident in the game tonight is they had that pushback. They had that answer. And like Spencer Carberry referenced, a certain level of desperation towards the end of the game there, that it did appear that the Capitals were gassed, and it really seemed like the Bruins were pouring on the pressure. So huge thing. And Dubois, as we know, was the player that was traded for in the offseason, the deal that sent Darcy Kemper out to the Kings, and returned, they got Pierre-Luc Dubois. And pretty much every other NHL team or Locked On host or whoever I talk to that does podcasts and covers the NHL, they go, "Hey, Dan, what are you thinking about that Pierre-Luc Dubois deal? You know that he's trouble. He didn't fit in with the Kings. Some people said he was a cancer in the locker room, that he was disinterested." And to be fair, I listened to a lot of the hype. And when I listened to that, that's what I'm like. I thought to myself, what did the Capitals get themselves into? What did Brian McClellan get the Capitals into? But what I have seen has been nothing but the opposite from Pierre-Luc Dubois this season. The players love him in the locker room. I like the play that I see from him out on the ice. He has not only elevated his game, but has elevated the game of the players around him. And he continues to shine for the Capitals, recording his 23rd assist, which puts him second on the team. He has points in 6 of his last 7 games. So that's what I'm talking about, is whatever people said, about his previous stops with the Kings, with the Jets, with Columbus, that he has been just one excellent player. And if you kind of want to know the history, listen to the Break the Ice podcast with Mike Vogel. He had Pierre-Luc Dubois in there, and it went over his extensive history. And it was just a really interesting listen, to see where he came from and just why he is the player that he is today. But PLD, as far as I'm concerned, has been nothing but lightning in a bottle for this team all season. And why did the Capitals win this game? It was about, resilience and defense. As I talked about, the Bruins got off to that great start. The Capitals had some pushback, thanks in large part to Aliaksei Protas, of course, who has been just huge for this team, scoring a goal and then getting an empty netter, quite an accomplishment. But the resilience of this team, as the game progressed, the second line consistently created opportunities, showcasing their size and strength, and ultimately why they were put out in this game when they needed some scoring. And you take a look at it, that line has been money for the Capitals all season long. And the line that gives the Capitals the best chance at offensive production. And in those clutch moments, Protas delivered again with his second goal. The Caps showed resilience, which is something to underline, especially after that early goal against them. That's 3 games in a row they faced that scenario, yet they're improving defensively. And again, you want to talk about Aliaksei Protas, a guy that has wowed me. I did not see this coming, that I knew that he had the potential of being a good player, but he has elevated his play into a great player. And what kind of player is he going to grow into in years to come? This team, a year or so from now is good, but it's going to even be markedly better when you add players like Leonard, Crystal, those kind of players to the mix. And another player that has really elevated his game, who was already a good player, but is just taking it to that next level and really making it hard for the Capitals not to just back up the brink truck to his house, and that is Jakob Chychrun. He scored that crucial goal on a power play late in the first period, giving the Capitals a 2-1 lead. So Protas with the first goal, Chychrun huge, and then Protas with the empty netter, just getting it done, and not from sources that you saw historically in previous years. Of course, Chychrun wasn't on the team, but it's interesting they're getting it done without necessarily these marquee names. But Chychrun, a breakout season that he's having so far. That was his 11th goal of the season, tying him for the most among defensemen in the league. So the hard part about all of this, as I'm sure you guys can jump to this conclusion as well, is we know that he is going to be a great piece if the Capitals can lock him up for the future. but it's not going to come cheap. And are the Capitals willing to do whatever it takes to sign him to a lengthy deal? If I have any level of concern, is that we saw him injured once this season, and it was like a game or so ago. He left the ice briefly. That I'm not saying he's injury prone, but he's an over the top player defensively, really great offensively. I think it's worth. I hate to say gamble, but I think it's definitely worth it for Chychrun to just push all your chips in. Rarely do I say that about a player, that just kind of give him whatever he wants. The last player that comes to mind is Tom Wilson, where I thought to myself, do pretty much whatever it takes to make Tom Wilson a Capital for a long time. The same thought for me goes with Jakob Chychrun. He is that answer on the blue line. This is an addition of Chychrun and Roy in the offseason. As we know, Roy signed that, was it a 6-year deal? He's going to be a Capital for some time. This harkens back to me in certain regards to the Niskanen Orpik deals that we remember that totally revolutionized the blue line for the Capitals in really important parts of their history. So I think if Chris Patrick was wise, they would do the right thing and sign Jakob Chychrun up in the long term. But as far as his offense is concerned, he's been on fire, like I say, recording 17 points over his last 17 games. Definitely a key player for this team this year. That is for sure. All right, so coming up here after the break, I'll talk about special teams and defensive improvements by the Capitals. I'll break it all down next. The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. FanDuel has so many ways for you to pick up a W. I love betting on which players will score a touchdown and how many points each team will score. It's thrilling. And listen, there is a lot of football that's played on any given Sunday or Monday or Thursday, and some of those games you're into, some of them you're not. Say it's a Ravens game or a Commanders game, but if you want to have interest in all of the games, open up the FanDuel app, put a little bit of money on the game. All of a sudden, those games got that much more exciting. So just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your chance at $250 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team. Every day you can find me over on Twitter. It's at DanCaps218. You can find the show on Twitter. It's at Locked On Caps. You'll have to bear with me. I'm coming over some illness, so my voice isn't 100%. But talking about special teams performance in this game, which definitely played a key role in the Capitals' victory. The Capitals' power play was effective at 1 for 3, continuing their trend with goals in 4 of their last 5 games. And that's one of the things that I've mentioned about the Capitals all season long is special teams and how it will be drawn more into focus the further we get along during the season. And what I'm talking about, had the Capitals not made good on one of those opportunities, how could this game have potentially changed? Or if you had given up a power play goal, on the other end of the spectrum. So the power play, the PK being huge, definitely factored into the Capitals' success. Plus, as we know, Logan Thompson has been huge for the Capitals all season long, making 25 saves on 26 shots. Who's going to be the guy that gets the extension? I know that Elliot Friedman had said that he thought that, and his idea was, and what he had heard is that the Capitals were saying that the Capitals are all in on LT and the outlaw Charlie Lindgren. But at the end of the day, I see it being Logan Thompson over Charlie Lindgren. Just kind of my early assessment. I don't see the Capitals having the money to get that done. But Logan Thompson has been absolutely huge. A major contributor to the win and boasting his record to 14-2 on the season. What else can we ask for from a netminder? I don't think a lot. But Defensive improvements, as we have seen gaps in the defense at points this season. The defense showed significant improvement compared to the last game against Detroit. And also Tom Wilson stepped up with 2 assists. And that's one of the things, is there were certain gaffes that we saw in the game against the Detroit Red Wings, which ultimately what spelled the loss. So that is the certain things that the Capitals have cleaned up. And Tom Wilson, again, just playing a huge role. He's closing in on 200 career assists, sitting just 3 away now, and he's got points in 2 of his last 3 games. That is what we're talking about. What we're looking for from these players is these key players. Tom Wilson, who is going to be the captain of the team in the future, has been a huge contributor all season long. Bit of a scary moment. I'm going to transition here to Martin Fehervary and a case of some friendly fire, but this time it was from Tom Wilson, which is interesting. Tom Wilson was the victim of friendly fire the last time, except that was from Jakob Chychrun. Martin Fehervary had to leave the game due to a high stick from Tom Wilson, which is development we'll keep an eye on. And interestingly, the game was also notable as it marked the first time Alex Ovechkin did not score while wearing his favorite Screaming Eagle jersey. So we know that he is a favorite of that jersey. And we know that, the last couple of years here that it has been said that the Capitals have one of the ugliest jerseys in the NHL. That might be a little bit strong. I'm going to go ahead and say maybe a little bit dated is what I would say. And if they made the return to that Screaming Eagle jersey, say they made that their home jersey, I don't think any player would have any problem with it. But the moment in this game that kind of took me by surprise, and I know that Andrew Mangiapane has a bit of snarl to his game, but to see him win that fight so decisively over Carlo was quite something, as Carlo is a big dude, but it's just like, I think Andrew Mangiapane realized that if I'm going to win this fight, I'm really going to have to just bring the intensity right away, or that Carlo could run away with it. And that was that standout moment, who really stepped up during a critical moment as Connor McMichael was driving to the net. Things got a little heated, and that skirmish broke out. What's interesting, though, about Mangiapane, despite not having any fight experience in his pro career, decided to make his presence known. And I'm going to go ahead and say made quite an impression in his first fight. He pulled Bruins defenseman Brandon Carlo out of the fray, leading to a physical altercation. Talk about standing up for your teammate. And Mangiapane, like I said, just when you watch him, how he carries himself, that he's a bit feisty. He's got a little bit of attitude. So I'm honestly kind of surprised that, according to Hockey Fights, he had not been in a fight before. But I think, all things considered, maybe he's become emboldened by this fight, because I'm going to go ahead and say a pretty decisive win. He was laying on top of him, and you couldn't see a whole lot just from the vantage point, because it was kind of, by the net there, but you could see some punches going down there. Quite a decisive victory. And it was a big moment for Mangiapane as well, showcasing that he's not just about scoring, but also knows how to throw down and stick up for his teammates. So quite a game for the Capitals. All things considered, a great game. They lost their way, maybe lost their focus a little bit in the third period, where they really had to ratchet up the pressure and batten down the hatches in the defensive department. But all things considered, a great win by this team. And we hope they can build on that as they play the Minnesota Wild next. Let's hope they can keep it rolling. All right, so coming up here after the break, we'll talk about that it was Ivan Miroshnichenko in and Jakub Vrana out. Was that the right idea? I'll discuss next. I love going to live events, whether it's sports, music, theater, or comedy. One of my favorite memories was attending a concert last year. The energy and excitement were unforgettable. Now, Game Time has made it even easier to get tickets for your favorite events with their new feature called Game Time Picks. This feature filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. And that is the case. I've went to go see my favorite concert, my favorite sports team. There's a lot of questions. What is the view of the stage or the playing surface going to be like? What kind of price am I going to pay? How much headache is it going to be to get these tickets? Well, take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON NHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team. Every day, the best way that you can help grow the show is to subscribe or follow Locked On Capitals on YouTube. Subscribe, comment, share. It really helps grow the channel, and I sure would appreciate it. All right, in this next segment here, we're going to talk about the decision by Spencer Carberry to have Ivan Miroshnichenko in and Jakub Vrana out. And as I posted on Twitter earlier, it's not often that I question Spencer Carberry's decisions. Usually I agree with them. And sometimes I'm like, wow, that's a good thought you had going there. I didn't even consider that. But this game, I was thinking to myself, what does Jakub Vrana have to do to get out of Spencer Carberry's doghouse? And it appears that that's where he's at. You know, he can score goals and then have a couple games where he's not really bringing it. And that's one of the things Carberry mentioned, is that when you're one of these fringe players, you're not Alex Ovechkin, you're not Tom Wilson, where you can have a bad game, 2 or 3, that you better bring it every single game. And if you don't, well, it's going to be the next guy. And I think that this kind of goes back from Vrana all the way back into training camp, where, you know, Spencer Carberry didn't seem too impressed with him. He thought he played well, but he wasn't singing his praises. And I think that I've seen this before from him. I've seen this when Sonny Milano was healthy, that he lost favor with Spencer Carberry, you know, for whatever reason, if you don't bring it, or the impression that you give to Carbs is that you're not fully invested and you're not going to bring it on a night in and night out basis, then he's on to the next one. That's, I mean, if you want proof in it, Henrik Slaughter was in there for a long time when Vrana was out. What did Henrik Slaughter do in those games when Vrana was out? If you take a look at the back of his hockey card, pretty much nothing. And in the game today, what did Miroshnichenko have? A -1 rating, zeros all the way across the board. And you take a look at what Vrana has done here lately, it really kind of draws it into question. And I know I heard quite a bit of things from different people on social media. Dan, what are you talking about? They got to keep these guys fresh. Listen, we're kind of past that point, I hate to say. And if we're looking to keep guys fresh, maybe we need to cycle them down in Hershey, like what they're doing with LaPierre, because the Metro is getting tighter and tighter. And you take a look at it, they don't have a lot of ground to screw around, because they have a team like the Carolina Hurricanes nipping at their heels, hoping that the Capitals stumble, hoping the Capitals start losing games. That I think that you should go for more of the sure thing at this point of the season. I know that the playoffs aren't tomorrow, but you take a look at it, the Capitals are in first place now. I guess it's the Capitals, the Devils, and the Hurricanes. But again, if there's a stumble here or there, the Devils are right there. You know, the Capitals lose a game, they win a game, you know, it's going to bounce back and forth. And like I say, with Carolina, they're right in the mix there as well, that things could get really interesting. So I don't think you really have the luxury of going, well, you know, I think that we should cycle Miro in. And not to say anything too disparagingly about him, but what I am saying is that the last few games that Miro has kind of been in Spencer Carberry's doghouse and really hasn't lit up the score sheet, even though Vrana had put up goals, making a statement for himself. Hey, I should be the guy in the mix. So it is a different, you know, an interesting posture that they're deciding to take. And I know what I've heard Spencer Carberry say, and that is what he said. It's not verbatim. I watched the interview, and that was generally what he said, is that when you're a fringe player, you need to bring it. And it was his impression that Vrana was not bringing it. So I think that is some of the things that Jakub Vrana is going to have to work on, that you don't have the luxury of dilly-dallying. And remember, you know, when you're talking about Miroshnichenko, Miroshnichenko was eager to make a statement, getting into this game. This was a significant chance for him to showcase his potential after being called up. He was given an opportunity when Alex Ovechkin got injured, and all things considered, played pretty well. Pretty well. That third line for me is still the question mark, and kind of what I get, the feeling from Spencer Carberry is still the line that's a weakness for him. Mangiapane, good. Eller is okay. And then you have kind of that wild card where it's Miroshnichenko, it's LaPierre, it's Vrana, this kind of thing that I really think if this team wants to push all of their chips in, they need a solid third line. However that's going to manifest. If it's given a guy like Ethan Frank an opportunity, which, hey, I've been pounding the table for that for quite a while here, lighting it up in the AHL. And I'm not going to guarantee you that it's going to be lightning in a bottle that, wow, that really fixed what ailed the Capitals. But I sure think it's darn worth a look to get a look to see what he has. And, some people would say, well, Dan, you just got done saying you're looking for the sure thing. Again, Miro's not the answer right now. Right now, he's not the answer. LaPierre got sent down to the AHL. Vrana, I think, should have been in this game. I'm going to go ahead and say it. But if there's questions about Vrana, then I think that you take a look at a guy that has been truly lighting it up for the Bears, and that is Ethan Frank. And if not that, I think that, Chris Patrick needs to facilitate some kind of deal. I don't know how long the Capitals want to try retreading the tire on a guy like Hendrix Lapierre. I'm not into feel-good stories. I'm really not. You take a look at it, Hendrix Lapierre, that, you take a look at all the inside analytics and what people had thought about him, that he's going to be this great player. Haven't seen it yet. I'm sorry. The Jack Butterfield Award, MVP, all of that in the NHL has been pretty much a nothing burger. So I think that if there's something that needs to be addressed, I'm not here to say send Miroshnichenko to the sidelines or push him out of the way. But what I am saying is that in this given game, I would have definitely gone with Vrana over Miroshnichenko. I think that, Miro's good. I still think that Miro could benefit from getting some more time playing down in Hershey. His game's good. It still needs some fine tuning. And I think that if he could play down in Hershey, getting some more playing time, let's get a look at him a little bit later in the season. If there's inconsistent play or injury, that kind of thing. For me, if I was the GM, if I was the head coach, I'd be Vrana in and Miro out, either as a healthy scratch or if they want to keep him fresh down in Hershey. But that's what I'm talking about. Lapierre in there and that mix as well. Maybe he'll really light it up down in Hershey and come back re-energized. But I have seen no evidence of that so far. So, a tough break for Vrana, came to this team on a PTO trying to impress. And I'm not going to say that he has been just this great player all season long. He hasn't been. But what I've seen from him as of late has been some great play. I would have tried to roll with that positive momentum. I guess it remains to be seen how the Capitals plan to address this as they take on the Minnesota Wild next. All right, once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals and making it your first listen each and every day. For your second listen, find Locked On Fantasy Hockey, become a fantasy hockey expert, and get the edge over your league mates. With the daily tips from Steal and Flip, find Locked On Fantasy Hockey on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. All right, once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Dan Holme, and I'll talk to you again next time.